Joining us now, we have in studio with us State Representative Brandt Smith is back with us. Brandt, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Paul. Just thankful to God for another day to put my feet down on the ground.
That's exactly right. I concur. What can you tell us about the Joint Performance Review Committee last Tuesday? Finally, you guys got to talk to the people in positions of authority at the Arkansas School for Math, Science, and the Arts.
Well, prior to that JPR hearing, a select group of us did meet with ASMSA's director, Corey Alderdice. We met at least with him once. We met with Melissa Rust both times, and then Dr. Don Bobbitt.
Okay.
And so
this was before the
right
meeting.
before the meeting.
Yeah.
These were just come in, let's talk, and they were willing to come in, and so we had. Those were substantive meetings as far as information back and forth, what we felt like we needed to know, what their responses to our questions were. And then, of course, Representative Jimmy Gazaway, who is a co-chair on JPR, also co-chair with Senator Hickey, who stepped out. He was out of pocket that day, and so Senator Rice stepped in to co-chair. They did a great job, but the takeaway for me was, and that they were not placed under oath, but I think there'll be another hearing soon. It could be after the holidays, but it will take place, and that we will place them under oath at that time.
Really?
Well, because some of the comments to questions, the responses came back to us in that hearing. We felt like they weren't honest answers. And some of the statements made by Director Alderdice in a radio interview down in Hot Springs last week seemed to contradict his statements before the Joint Performance Review Committee. And so comments that related to drug use, drugs being found.
You're talking about with students?
With the students, and how that some of these students, were basically slapped on the wrist, their drugs taken and disposed of, but we don't know, what does that mean, disposed? Did someone take it and use those drugs for personal use on the staff down there, Res Life staff, or did they actually flush them or, get rid of them? And the comment was that they had a special agreement or arrangement made with the Hot Springs Police Department to do that. And I suspect that it was to prevent negative publicity. But the comment to me later was, why would the students at ASMSA have any special privileges over other high school students in our other schools in the Hot Springs area? So there's a lot of things that just didn't match. Yeah. I mean, they were evasive, deflective. At one point, I asked Corey to describe his leadership style. And I said, let me preface that by saying, you've been identified as a bully. You've been identified as a manipulator, an intimidator, and I went through a list. And so I said, tell me how you see yourself. Describe your leadership style. And he went through this thing. You can go online and find it, but I came back with a follow-up question, and I said, so let me get this right. Everyone that's come out with their understanding of your leadership and being on the receiving end of some of your behavior, they're all wrong, and you're the only one that's right. And that created a little anxiety, I would suspect.
Yeah, and the descriptions of Director Alderdice are from just what a lot of griefs, former staff or teachers and that sort of thing.
Well, and some
Yeah.
have been let go.
And let go, yeah.
Yeah, that's a kind word for they were fired.
They were fired, yeah.
Or they just felt so pressured they couldn't take it anymore.
Right,
and they left.
yeah. And this was remind us, State Representative Brandt Smith, about the privilege walk. That was kind of the big first thing that we heard about.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about the privilege walk? Did that come up at all?
It came up a couple of times, and the fact is, the privilege walk is no longer being presented to the incoming juniors at ASMSA. And so that tells me and many of the members on JPR, if you no longer do this, there must have been something really wrong with it from the very beginning. And, there were comments made, well, no student really ever claimed, it impacted them or hurt them, or stressed them. But see, that's not true either, because we know that there have been numerous students that felt like, you've identified me as privileged, but then on the other side of it, there were students that came forward and said, you outed me
As being disadvantaged.
As being disadvantaged. And in a school like that, you want a cohesive student body. You want students from all walks to come together and move in the same direction toward achievement and excellence. And that one exercise basically drove a wedge between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
And the kids that don't have much in comparison to the kids that have substantially more, it's not their fault.
Mm-hmm.
They are the product of a home environment where maybe parents are overachievers, or they've been very frugal and successful in business, as opposed to those that are just struggling day to day. But why do we have to identify that?
Yeah.
So these kids, all of a sudden, it's like Johnny doesn't have a new pair of shoes. He buys his shoes from, one of the secondhand stores, while this student always goes to the superstores and buys the latest and greatest pair.
That's not doing anybody any good.
No, not at all. So those were things that happened, but supposedly it's gone.
So it's gone now. Let me ask you about some other or some other politicians on the committee. State Representative Mark Lowry. I'm told he asked some questions.
Mark did ask some very good questions. He tended to focus on the internal review or investigation, and if my memory serves me right, he questioned the validity of that document, and because there was so much redacted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those of us that sat in on the private meetings with ASMSA and Dr. Don Bobbitt, we were privileged to actually see the unredacted version, but it was very damaging and very forthtelling of the problems that people stated regarding Director Alderdice. And so that's why the released version, public version, had been redacted so heavily.
Yeah. Also, tell me about, because, I told the folks earlier, the reason, you're a state representative from Jonesboro, but you have constituents who sent their kids down to this.
Right.
This is why all these legislators really have a stake here. But one of the legislators from Garland County, Senator Alan Clark, he had a few things to say as well, right?
Well, in the private meetings, he mentioned a few things, but he was fairly quiet, observing, listening, processing what he was hearing. But the day, the 12th, when we had JPR, man, bless Alan's heart, he is an advocate for kids. And he basically said, look, to the panel that was in front of us, I would give the school an A for academics, but a D when it comes to working with kids. And he said, because of my background as a former youth pastor, I know how to work with kids, so I have some knowledge about this. But he questioned also a program or two where the LGBTQ agenda was presented to the kids, and he just was wondering, why would you do that? You know, there is an agenda, we know. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of hateful speech
Yeah.
because of some bills I ran, but he just took the lid off and it flowed out.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's a new development, though. I hadn't heard. I mean, I heard about the privilege walk, heard about, just not a very constructive environment. Haven't heard about LGBTQ programs.
well, and I wasn't there. I didn't see or hear the program. I don't suppose it was recorded, but it's just be transparent. That was the part that we
Yeah.
wanted most in the JPR hearing. For transparency's sake, and now that word has become less meaningful in so many ways. What is transparency? How much do you share? But, Senator Clark wanted to bring that up, that maybe there is an agenda down there where the LGBTQ students are brought in and allowed more credence to support their lifestyles. And,
Interesting.
well, and it's just a sad thing. It's almost like the privilege walk. If those students have not felt comfortable publicly stating, this is my orientation, this is my preference, why would you do that to them?
Mm-hmm.
And it caused some problems with the students that are considered straight. Why would you expose me to this stuff? It's almost like the transgender that came and spoke at the Jonesboro Public Library.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you expose children to that? What's the purpose of that?
Exactly. Well, it's a normalization is really what it is for something that.
Well, desensitizing our young people.
Yeah, absolutely.
To move into that questioning step.
Yeah. Now, so talk about taxpayer funding, because that's the issue here. Our taxpayer dollars are going to this, but the U.S., the School for Math, Science, and the Arts, they're actually under the University of Arkansas system.
Correct.
All right. Now, so was there discussion about changing that formula?
Well, I did mention, I said if I had, my personal preferences, and I'm addressing the panel, I said I would like to see ASMSA moved out from under U of A, the U of A system, and brought under, and I think I mentioned, I don't know if Dr. Johnny Key would be interested in that, but I think it would be better to move them under ADE. And I'd also like to see Director Alderdice removed. And, of course, they all had responses, and one was ADE doesn't have the skill or the, knowledge of running a school where students are boarded. Well, immediately following the hearing, someone approached me and said, but ADE oversees the blind school and the deaf school, and those children are housed in a boarding situation. So yes, they do. And so some of the arguments that ASMSA made, they're valid. They're providing more oversight, more administrative control, but that's also reason to say that there were serious problems if they're implementing these changes.
Yeah.
But we don't know where this is going to go. But
did you feel like you got to the bottom of everything? We're at the bottom yet, or we still have more digging to do?
I think we have more digging to do, because some of the, I believe Representative Mark Lowry was on a radio broadcast program down in Hot Springs. And within a few minutes, when his interview concluded, Director Alderdice went on that same program and was interviewed. And some of the comments made by Director Alderdice contradicted his statements in front of JPR. And so the next time, and we will bring them back according to the co-chair, we'll bring them back. But Senator Trent Garner mentioned we need to put them under oath. And that's going to happen. And when it does, there'll be people going through all of this with a fine-tooth comb to see, well, where did they perjure themselves? Where did they contradict themselves, maybe multiple times? And one of the things I brought up was I had information passed me that some of the grants that ASMSA receives, some of that money was channeled to another project that was unrelated to the grant. And so the person that spoke to me said they confronted Director Alderdice, and he had flat out mentioned, well, I haven't been caught yet. So I can't validate all of that. I'm hoping that it's not true, but if that's true, legislative audit, the auditors down there, they will find that out. They're really good at looking for discrepancies and where did that money go. And so it's a matter of time.
Yeah.
And after the hearing was over, I mentioned to co-chair Jimmy Gazaway, I said, Jimmy, I started to conclude my remarks were to Director Alderdice. If I were you and you were me, I'd be getting my CV or my resume put together, updated. And he said, well, I'm glad you didn't do that, But, and I said, I know it sounded terrible, but somebody has been doing some things that are so wrong that even with the shift and the changes and things have improved greatly, I will agree to that. It goes back to why did they think they could get away with this behavior for so long?
That's exactly right.
So heads may roll.
That's exactly right.
And it doesn't bring me any personal pleasure. I'm not looking for a job down there. Like if I can get this person out, maybe I can step in. It's just doing what's right for my constituents.
Real quick, we're talking with State Representative Brandt Smith about the Arkansas School of Math and Science. He did file for re-election. Any surprises about that? I know you've
I just heard Joe sigh real big. So is that a negative from you, Joe?
I think,
you're stretching. Well, we'll allow that.
I think Joe's just ready for us to go to break. Anyway, go ahead. What were
your thoughts? I'm ready to go. Okay. Well, no, I filed on the first day.
Okay.
I am eager to serve District 58. I love the role. And I've been down there long enough, even though I don't consider myself establishment. We've got to have some history in our legislators that are there long enough to know where the skeletons are.
Context.
Or to know which door to look behind, who to trust and who to be leery of. And so I've reached that point with 3 terms now that I want to go back. I want to complete some of the things that we've started. And so I need another term. And I'm hoping that the people of District 58 who know me, know my values, my biblical worldview, that will make a difference in not only the primary that we have in March, but once we get past that, will sustain us and send me back to Little Rock after the general in November.
Yeah. State Representative Brandt Smith, I appreciate it. It's always great to have you on.
It's a privilege, Paul.
Okay, it's a privilege.
It's a privilege.
We're going to take a break. Going to be back here in just a moment.